I want to thank everybody for joining in on the call today. And I'm going to make a few opening remarks, and then Rebecca Ellis, my state director, is going to recognize people and move it along. But the opening remarks is this. Number one, this is shocking. I think it's shocking and appalling what President Trump did. It also happens to be illegal. You know, if Congress passes appropriations, as you know, that's the Article I authority of Congress. And a president does not have the right to pick and choose what he will honor with respect to congressional appropriations. So, and the courts have backed us up on this. The difficulty we have is that this president doesn't really care whether it's legal or not, whether he has authority or not. And he's in charge of the executive branch. So he sends out these orders, the impoundment order, basically, and it will get done. And then it creates incredible chaos and confusion for everybody who's going to be affected by it. And what I find, so I'm just talking personally about this now, you know, I think this administration, this president seems to think that there's some benefit in creating chaos. And you throw everything up in the air, you create uncertainty, and somehow he thinks that's a good thing. You know, I just being very blunt, I think it's cruel. You know, I just think about the effect of what happened when you all got these letters. Molly Gray, who I worked with for so many years, I just think of all those Afghan refugees where we have this profound obligation because they helped us, they helped our men and women who were in Afghanistan, and then they are depending on getting the visa, and suddenly that whole program is stopped. Or I think of a mom who finally was able to get a dental appointment for her son or daughter that was a Medicaid provider, and the website goes dark. So that mom who was thinking, hey, we're going to the dentist finally, is not able to do it. You know, these are, I'm talking to the people who know the real world impacts of this, that it's not this abstraction, that it's really impacting you and you doing your work, but you're doing your work so the people for whom you are working can have some dignity and security and opportunity in their lives. So I'm speaking just on a personal level. I think it's cruel for an executive to create that kind of chaos and uncertainty for so many people. And I just want to express to you that I'll do, and many of my colleagues will do every single thing we can to push back here. And by the way, I was with Bernie last night and told him we were going to be doing this, and he sends his regards, but he and I are going to be working together to push back on this. And I know Becca very much is on the same page. So you can count on us here doing everything we can, even if we don't have the authority to just wave a wand and put things back together. I think it's really important for Vermonters to hear your stories and hear of what's going on and what the impact is. On our website, we have a portal where if anybody, you especially, can go on and report what's happening. And I think there's a private place there as well, because some of the things that you or others may want to mention, you might want to keep that private or just share it with our office. So I want to do that. But I'm going to turn this over to Rebecca because I want to hear from you. But I just do want to say, I'm so proud. We all are, okay, of Vermont, where we actually think cooperation is much better than conflict. We're willing to wade through the hard work of resolving differences, but we ultimately have a goal of trying to make things better for our community. And we also have an attitude that having a disagreement or having a discussion is one thing, but using power to basically impose your will or to disregard another person's right is not acceptable. We don't do that in Vermont. And the strength of our nonprofit community, I think, is a real indication of that. And the other thing I just want to say, it's amazing to me you know, we went through these two natural disasters where folks in our state in July of 23 and then July of 24 got really hammered. In some cases, like in Barrie, on the anniversary of the 23 flood, the same homes that got flooded in 24. And, you know, the response that Vermonters had to that was so, you know, amazing. And then to actually have an order that comes out from the president where it throws into disarray the access to the funds that are there to help our farmers. We finally got some money in there to help our farmers who lost their crops, and some folks who lost their homes. We're not getting any information on the buyout. That's why I use the word cruel. Why would anyone do that? It's fair and square to have a debate about the budget, okay? But it's not fair and square to basically tell people who have received appropriations and the commitment through the work of both the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, oh, we're just kidding, and have a president do that when he has no authority to do it. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm turn it over to Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So as I said at the beginning, please raise your hand, your virtual hand, and I will call on you to speak. So in Zoom, the virtual hand is in the reactions button at the bottom of the screen, and click in the middle of the button, not on the side, and you'll see your raise hand feature. I do want to remind people that this Zoom meeting is being recorded and we have press in the room. And because we have a large group, please try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes to allow time for other people to speak. We have a hard stop at 12 noon. And when you start, please start by saying your name and the name of your organization. So let's see, I'll just go how I see people at the top of the screen. Sonali, why don't you start?
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm Sonali Samarasinghe. I'm the Field Office Director for the United States Committee for Refugees and Immigrants in Vermont. Thank you, Senator Welch. I just want to talk about the impact real quick and bring up some stories. Al Congolese family was set to arrive on February 6th, had waited 22 years. These are refugees who are properly vetted, and he waited 22 years. Flight was cancelled. A young Somali man was waiting 16 years for his elderly mother, I'm sorry, and they had completed the final USCIS interview, now in limbo. A Burmese woman here for 16 years was about to have her elderly father join her on February 26th. It was cancelled. An Afghan woman was to receive her mother and two sisters, one of whom had a developmental disability. The woman in Vermont and her mother had to flee the Taliban due to their work supporting women's education, and they cannot come in anymore. Yesterday, I am sorry to say that in the hospital, one of our full-time staff members was approached by someone who asked her. She does not look like a American. She does not dress like an American, and asked for her for proof of citizenship. She was able to push back, but our clients are not always that confident. And they're new Americans and they've just arrived here. One more thing is with the reception and placement funds now, with the stop work order on the 24th, we have 59 of our clients that we really need to serve, and we just don't have the money for that. And we need right now about 97,000 to serve them, because they are within that 90-day period. I also want to talk about housing. We have 79 families in temporary housing. This is very challenging for us. It's a lot of funds. We don't have the funds, and it's a public safety issue because there's homelessness, and we don't have the funds to go on paying their rents. So I just wanted to bring up those real grassroots challenges that we are facing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonali.
And thank you, Sonali. Thank you.
I'll just keep moving through folks so we can hear from as many people as possible. So Karen Price, you're next.
So hi, I am Karen Price from the Vermont Family Network. VFN is a nonprofit that has been supporting families of children with disabilities and special health needs for over 30 years. All of our staff are also parents of children with disabilities. We are funded primarily through federal and state funding. Our federal grants are as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, Parent Training and Information Center, as well as the Family to Family Health Information Center. Our state funding is largely federal flow-through. The executive order and the memo has thrown all of our funding that we have relied on into disarray. We had problems accessing our funding portals on Tuesday. We had no idea whether we would receive any more funding. We suspended all of our planned activities. We talked about furloughing our employees. Since then, we have received no guidance at the federal level from our project offices at the Department of Education or at the Department of Health and Human Services. OMB guidance states we cannot draw down more than 3 days of expenses, and there has been a precedent of allowing more for drawdown in the situation of a potential government shutdown, but we have had no guidance this time. We have employees, we have operational expenses, cash flow for a nonprofit like VFN is tight. We cannot sustain a prolonged non-receipt of funding. Every day since Tuesday has been filled with anxiety and uncertainty. Our employees depend on their paychecks. Here are some of the services that we provide that are in jeopardy. We have a helpline for parents around navigating their children's health and education needs. Many of these children are struggling with mental health issues. They are being bullied, they are being expelled. Many of them are not able to access any education at all. Their families are stressed, angry, and frustrated. We also had to immediately stop dispersing checks to families on Tuesday for medical needs that are not covered by Medicaid, as well as money to pay for equipment for their children's safety needs. This freeze creates immediate hardship and potential long-term consequences for our vulnerable families. Freezing funding for nonprofit organizations like us will cause us to stop functioning. We support families of the most vulnerable children. We are the families of the most vulnerable children. Thank you, Senator Welch.
Thank you. We will next turn to Pollaidh Major.
Yeah, thank you, by the way. I'm sorry, I was on mute, but thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Welch, for hearing these stories and for all the work you do to secure the federal funds for Vermont that play such a critical role. I'm Pollaidh Major. I work with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and we administer federal funds that help to build housing and help to make farmland affordable to farmers. And this week, we had to contemplate what it looks like to Vermonters to not have that support. We see that federal funds play a critical role in filling the gaps in projects to make sure they can go forward, and that they're done through a reimbursement basis, which puts housing projects to fill Vermont's great housing need at incredible risk. I want to be clear, these projects are moving forward now, but we are having to think about what would it look like if that financing to fill the gap came out of projects and those projects fell apart. So there's 18 multifamily projects around the state that are under construction, and that's over 500 units, 162 of which are dedicated for households that are exiting homelessness. And those would be left half constructed if their financing fell apart. They're in communities like Barrie, which is working to recover from a flood, like Windsor, that's trying to invest in its downtown, and like Newport, that knows more than any other community the impact on community development of a project being left unfinished in the community. And that's not all. We have another 370 homes that have federal commitments to them that are moving towards closing, that want to get under construction. We have developers that want to meet the housing needs of our state that would not be able to do so if this federal funding were to be pulled back. So we are highly concerned about the path the federal government is going down and what it means to builders, to construction teams, to anyone who's depending on wait lists, depending on these homes to secure housing if these federal funds are pulled back. We also administer a program for persons living with HIV, and that includes rental assistance for those persons. So we're putting them at extreme risk if we cannot pay that rental assistance. The other piece that work that we're trying to continue to do is to remediate lead hazards in homes. And that's being done by small contractors around the state. And should that cease or work order come through for that program, those contractors cannot be paid. So this really impacts the direct recipients of the funds, and it impacts Vermont's whole economy, especially in the area of housing that's so critical right now. So thank you, Senator Welch, for everything you're doing to continue to make sure these funds can reach Vermont communities.
Thank you, Pollaidh.
Next, Jenna O'Farrell.
Thank you. Hi, Senator Welch. Thank you so much for holding this today and all you and your office has been doing to support our work. I'm Jenna O'Farrell. I'm the Executive Director of Northeast Kingdom Community Action. We serve Caledonia, Orleans, and Essex County. We are part of the Vermont Community Action Network, or we have a partnership between SEVCA, Brock, Capstone, and CVOEO. So together we make up your Vermont Community Action Network. And we've been around since 1964, and we serve low-income Vermonters. And Community Action serves every single county in the United States. Our core funding comes from a community service block grant. And then we have multiple other funding streams through the federal government. We do things like weatherization, housing, our food insecurity programs, and our Head Start programs. So primarily, we do about probably over 50% of each of our community action agencies' budgets are federal funding that we don't have access to right now. Head Start is, although it's been rescinded there, we do not have access to payments. So we are able to get into the payment management system, but we are not able to draw down any funds. It continues to say pending. So right now, I can speak for our organization at NECA, we are unable to make payroll. At the first of the month, we have many leases on properties, our Head Start sites, that we're unable to pay landlords. And we are in a really tough situation.
That is awful. Thank you.
It is pretty terrible.
It really is. It's just unbelievable.
Right. So I just wanted to let you know, even though it says Head Start has been rescinded,
Yeah.
it's not.
No, and just I'm going to interrupt here. That's part of the method here. This is not accidental, because what he knows, the president, is that if he causes this kind of chaos and disruption, Jen, you're talking about, it can threaten the well-being or the stability or the survivability of an organization. And that's why we've just got to get this thing officially rescinded, those portals back open. But there's a real method to this. It's intentional. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It certainly strains the entire system. And we are working hard to protect, we have 160 employees throughout the Northeast Kingdom and serve thousands of families. So it's definitely impactful. Thank you.
Next on my screen is Joe Wiah.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Senator. My name is Joe, and we met several times. I'm the director of ECDC. And ECDC is one of the refugees resettlement agencies in Vermont, and we're based in South Vermont, serving both Windham and Bennington counties. I just want to begin by thanking you, because you have been one of the supporters of our work here. Right now, we have, as we speak, for this year, we have 76 refugees who came in between October to January 20th. But the real impact of what has happened to these refugees is that because they are within their 90 days, and our funding comes from two sources. We get funding from PRM, which is tied into the foreign aid. So when the foreign aid was, the executive order came out for all foreign aid being blocked, we immediately got shut out of our funding. So we cannot, and in fact, provide basic services to those who are staying in their 90 days. The federal government gave each person $1,650. Because of the housing situation we have in our state, we normally keep that amount so that as they leave SIT, where we usually have them for temporary housing, we use that for security deposit, and first money, last month rent. We don't have access to those funds anymore. We sometimes also use those funds for basic things like food when they arrive, or other emergencies that they need when they come. We don't have access to those funds right now. And it's so difficult for us to even tell our clients how, to support them. I must say, though, the community has been very supportive. They have been generous. As Vermont being, as always, Vermonters always step up in this kind of crisis. They have been coming up and supporting us. But still, the federal funds were, was enough to be able to do this, and we haven't reached that level of supporting our clients. We continue to carry out our mission by serving these clients. We realign our programs. With the impact of this, I unfortunately had to let 9 of our staff leave. And these are staff that have been with us from the beginning, who have been supporting these clients. And we had to, carry on the painful action of letting them go. And then again, as you all know, we received an order executive, even though it did not come to us, but was in the Washington Post. And that funding comes after 90 days. So if that takes place, it means that we are completely done. We can't support all the refugees that have been here for that period. So we just want to ask you, as you have always done, to continue to, as best as you can, put in, human stories to these situations. Is a real impact on those who are here, and also those who have not come. Some of my clients are asking me what's going to happen. We have a client in Bennington whose children were going to come and join her. She cannot even now. She doesn't even know if they will ever come. We have other refugees in Kenya refugees camp, those from Congo who were scared to come. And, as my colleague from USCRI said, some of those folks have stayed 20 years, 15 years in those camp. And now they don't even know if they're going to come. So we're in this very uncertain times right now, but we really just want to thank you for your incredible support to refugees resettlement. And we will do our best on the ground, continue with the support of the volunteers and community partners we have. Anything you can do at the federal level to help us continue supporting refugees here, we do really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your wonderful work. And I look forward to coming down again soon. Thank you.
I thank you. I look forward to it, Senator. Thank you.
Next on my screen is Caitlin McKenzie.
Good morning. Thank you. Hi, Senator, fellow Vermonters. I'm biology faculty at Bennington College. I have 2 quick stories about the National Science Foundation, which funds my research. The first is I'm on a collaborative research grant with folks from University of Vermont and University of Maine to study the ecological impacts of climate change on our plant communities in the Green Mountains. This is a proposal that we wrote in 2023. It was funded in 2023. It started January 1st, 2024. It's 4 years of $2 million that is now disappeared and apparently under review again because it's about climate change. We have no directions from NSF about what's happening with this, how to support the students that are on this grant. We have graduate students. We're hoping to hire undergrads for summer research opportunities. We work with the Green Mountain National Forest, White Mountain National Forest, Adirondack State Forest, Baxter State Park, and folks in the Maine Appalachian Mountains, and all of those collaborations. I don't know. And that's a grant that exists and has been funded. But I was also working with folks from across the state of Vermont as part of a research collaboration network in undergraduate biology education, a proposal we were putting in on Tuesday. with the National Science Foundation. We were led by people from University of Vermont, Middlebury College, Norwich University, the State of Vermont Department of Agriculture, Food and Markets, the Fairbanks Museum, and Vermont Center for Eco Studies. All of us together manage small natural history collections. Think about your favorite natural history museum where you get to go and see the animals, the rocks, the plants. And we were trying to find ways to bring those into undergraduate biology classrooms to give students more hands-on opportunities to work with collections. This is a proposal we submitted last year, got pretty good reviews on, and we're resubmitting again this year. And then the day before the proposal was due, the entire solicitation was archived, and we have no directions or communication from NSF about what has happened to this entire program that supports undergraduate biology everywhere, but in this specific case would be a collaboration across Vermont. So I just wanted to share those as two brief examples of how while the federal grant freeze was, I guess, unfrozen, it hasn't actually affected NSF, and everything there is still frozen.
Thank you. Awful, obviously, but thank you.
Next on my screen is Jim Dlugos.
Yes, hi. Hello, everyone. I am Jim Dlugos, interim president of Landmark College in Putney. I want to start by thanking Senator Welch and his team for organizing today's conversation. 1 week before the freeze was announced, the college was awarded an $8 million grant from the National Science Foundation. In the wake of the freeze, we have been asked by various news outlets about the impact of the freeze on the grant. We can talk about that in a minute, but of equal, if not greater concern for us, is the impact of the freeze announcement on our students and their families. The uncertainty about the availability of Pell Grants, student loans, vocational rehabilitation funds, and other funding that our students and their families rely on, literally as the spring semester was beginning, was a source of great concern and stress. We had many families reach out to us on Tuesday to ask what this would mean for their students and for the college. Fortunately, Landmark College is in a position to be able to weather short-term disruptions and uncertainty, but we were able to convey that to our community. But we also know that the confusion and lack of clarity about what was in fact happening will have a lasting impact, not just on our day-to-day operations, but also on our forward-looking activities. The grant is a case in point. Just last week, we joined our partner institutions, Bennington College, the Community College of Vermont, and Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, to announce that together we had received an $8 million grant from the National Science Foundation, with a significant share of it coming to Landmark College as the lead institution. This grant was to establish a new program to expand science, technology, engineering, and mathematical, commonly referred to as STEM, research opportunities in Southern Vermont, titled the Science and Technology Research Initiative for the Vermont Economy, or STRIVE. As institutions proud to call the region home, we and our partners are thrilled about what the grant would mean for the people who work and live in Southern Vermont. If eventually funded, it will greatly enhance the STEM research infrastructure of the region, offering economic support and new employment opportunities in rapidly expanding science and technology fields, the type of careers that will be critical for innovation in Vermont and nationwide for generations to come, and provide good paying jobs for a region that needs them. For Landmark College specifically, this funding represented the single largest grant in our 40-year history, and if granted in full, it will be transformational to our research endeavors, creating new opportunities for our faculty and students, as well as for innovative businesses, not-for-profits, and local governments in our area. As a college that serves exclusively neurodivergent individuals and is proud to do so in rural Vermont, we are firmly committed to the success and well-being of our students, as well as the families of the more than 200 individuals who make our college run in both white and blue-collar jobs. For all of these folks, students, parents, staff, and faculty alike, Monday night's executive order upended daily life, introduced new and urgent questions, and severely disrupted our ability to do our jobs and deliver for our students. While the order was rescinded and a portion of the financial aid funds were drawn down, we've yet to receive clear guidance from the NSF about whether anticipated federal research funding will be dispersed. Until then, we will continue to work with our federal delegation, partner institutions, and students and staff to make the case that Southern Vermont region needs this funding to build a thriving 21st century economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, I'm sorry.
Next on my screen is Steve Schmida.
Hey, Peter, thank you so much for all you're doing, and thank you for organizing today. Let me go into things. This is going to be really grim. So 70% of our work is with the U.S. Agency for International Development, the State Department. Before Secretary of State Marco Rubio's foreign assistance stop work order, we had 88 full-time staff here in the United States. With the stop work order, 62 of those have now been laid off, furloughed, or put on reduced hours. This number will increase by early next week. We are currently owed in excess of $3 million in current and past due invoices from USAID and state. This is for work that has been completed to the full satisfaction of the government, and we are not receiving payment. USAID has switched off its payment systems, so no payments are being processed. We believe this is illegal. Best estimate right now, this is happening across the foreign assistance field. This is a $40 billion field. Best estimate I heard this morning is 52,000 jobs are already lost as of today and across due to Secretary Rubio's stop work order. Millions around the world are going without much needed aid. There was an amazing article in the New York Times about just how disastrous this is. Meanwhile, and I have direct evidence of this, country governments are furious with the United States for pulling the rug out from under them, right? Because many governments partner with the United States on these aid projects, and they basically pulled the rug out from under them, let alone the beneficiary governments themselves. Many American businesses that work in the U.S. foreign assistance space are running out of cash and will file for bankruptcy. Many U.S. nonprofits are in the same boat because they cannot access the line of credit for their cooperative agreements. I had a call this morning with a very, very well-respected nonprofit that is doing incredibly important work in Ukraine, and the impact on this, and potentially it could have significant impacts on the Ukrainian conflict, are significant. Lastly, Marco Rubio has claimed that this is saving the taxpayer money. This is a lie. This is going to cost the American taxpayer billions of dollars in litigation, unemployment costs, and frankly, they're going to have to pay a lot of back costs that are going to rack up for the U.S. taxpayer. This is going to cost probably 10x of what they save. We have no objection whatsoever to the president wanting to review and reform foreign aid. We're with him on that. But this is not the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very grim. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my screen, I have John Ramsay.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm John Ramsay at the Center for an Agricultural Economy in Hardwick. Thank you, Senator Welch, and thank you to all your staff for this opportunity to have a conversation today and all you're doing. At the Center for Agricultural Economy, we rely on USDA funds that support over 100 small farm and food businesses. We also use those funds to get local food into our schools. We're also on the cusp of completing a very large infrastructure project that'll have a net positive benefit annually of tens of millions of dollars for our local farm and food businesses, and we're awaiting federal funds to be reimbursed on work that is already completed that we need to receive for our continued cash flow of that project. All of the same concerns, many that were expressed here, I would like to also just put out there that whatever we can do as a cohort of organizations or as a state to think 2, 3, or 4 years down the road, I would just welcome being part of that conversation, because I think that it's obvious that some of these challenges that we're seeing are only going to continue. And so whatever we can do to help your office, Senator, relay information down to DC, or whatever we can sort of do to help with bipartisan legislation that secures funding for what Vermont needs. Please let us know how we can help, and how we can start thinking long term about some of these funding challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And you're helping right now and getting the story out.
Next on my screen is Susan McClure.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Senator Welch. It's Susan McClure, the Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. Thank you so much for convening us all today and for your leadership during these just wild times. A lot of people have spoken about the impact of federal funding, immediate impact, long-term impact. Both the Vermont Arts Council and the creative sector who receives federal funding is experiencing those. I also wanted to bring up some confusion and concern that both we have as an agency and we're hearing from people who receive federal grants around the impact of the executive orders that have been signed so far on the work that we're doing with existing federal money. Some of the executive orders, as you know, contain incredibly restrictive and harmful language that can often directly contradict the inclusive missions of many of our state's cultural institutions. These organizations are really wondering if they can even spend the federal money they already have in the bank to do these programs that may be construed as going against some of these executive orders. And they're also concerned that if they do, it will maybe not allow them to receive federal funding in the future as well. We are reminding organizations to really, stay true to their values, but it's this very climate of fear that these executive orders are meant to create that's absolutely working. And in addition to not being able to do the work immediately, we're also seeing organizations who do often operate on a shoestring and are concerned about their future financial stability, kind of self-censor in those ways and hold themselves back from doing programming that might reach communities who really need their services, their support, their creativity. And as you know, and you've spoken about and supported, the creative sector often operates on a shoestring. There are not many arts organizations that operate fully on federal funding, but even a small amount of federal money that funds these Vermont organizations makes a really big difference in their ability to meet the needs of their communities. Another issue that has come out of the current administration is the change in remote work status for federal workers. This is something that affects many people in Vermont. There are lots of federal workers living here, some of them in the creative sector, some of them not. And with the end of these remote work agreements, that means both that folks who have worked for the government and are working and living in Vermont may not be able to do so in the future. Those remote workers often are populating our most rural communities and being part of those communities. And if they're not able to continue to do that, both the communities are going to lose people living there, but Vermont is also going to lose the taxes that those remote workers are paying in Vermont that support our state as well. So many, many issues here, including the immediate need for funds, but I know you're tracking all of them and we really appreciate your support on that.
Well, thank you so much.
Next on my screen is Andy Julow.
Yes, hi, Andy Julow, representing the 12 regional development corporations of Vermont. Thank you, Senator, for the time here. It's been said, and I don't think I need to tell this group here, but just to verbally state it, I mean, being a federal partner, which is what you are when you accept a grant, is not always a pleasant task. And one of the drawbacks is that you outlay a significant amount of money in anticipation of reimbursement. We have some RDCs that are 9 months into an outlay expecting reimbursement. And that supports employees who are essential connections to small businesses. And when you've already got 9 months out the door and you're expecting money back, and suddenly that's in question, you really have to think about laying off this staff immediately to stop the bleeding at that point, which is extremely painful for the municipal and the nonprofit projects that are either ready to go or already have a shovel in the ground. It means they really have to stop and think about whether they want to continue at this point. And all of this stuff, and it feels, hearing some of the work that's being done here and the human effect is really moving. There are some dollars and cents involved too, which should come into play. I mean, these economic development initiatives have been through Congress. They've gone through a committee that have determined that these are beneficial to our economy. So they are helping grow business, and they are particularly vital in rural Vermont and America with our lower income, where without public investment, those areas are being shut out of our economy. So I think there's definitely a dollars and cents case to be made for honoring the contracts that the federal government has issued with all of these organizations.
I agree fully, and thank you.
And next on my screen is Sarah Robinson.
Good morning, Senator Welch. Thank you so much for your longstanding support for Vermonters and Vermont organizations. I'm Sarah Robinson from the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and we support and represent 15 independent nonprofit organizations who provide advocacy support and emergency shelter to victims of domestic and sexual violence across Vermont. These organizations are primarily funded with federal funds and federal dollars that are passed through state agencies. This includes dedicated grant programs that have been authorized by Congress through the Violence Against Women Act and Health and Human Services funding. Our members have experienced similar impacts to many of the other nonprofits that have spoken today. It has caused deep instability in their operations. Federal funding in Vermont supports emergency shelter and hotline services for victims of domestic and sexual violence. And many of our programs also provide rapid rehousing, including paying rents for survivors who have had access to housing. And as with the other nonprofits on this call, our work is done on a reimbursement basis with the federal government. So many of our organizations were frozen out of payment systems earlier this week. And for those that have been able to access those portals, many of the payments still show as pending and not deposited. Despite this, these amazing organizations continue to provide 24-hour access to services to victims of domestic and sexual violence. And even after the rescission of the federal funding freeze, there have been additional and subsequent memos, even one released yesterday from the Office of Personnel Management about ending funds for grants promoting gender ideology, which we anticipate will have additional and sweeping subsequent impacts on our member organizations and the funds that they're able to access. So again, we thank you so much for your longstanding support of victims of domestic and sexual violence in Vermont. We know that this is an issue that is near and dear to you, and appreciate all of your work.
Sarah, thank you so much. And it is an issue near and dear to my heart, but everybody on the call, I mean, and the idea that there'd be some jeopardy that could be avoided. And you get these calls late at night, and that's the cruelty part of this that I just can't get that. So anyway, thank you so much.
Next on my screen is Andrew Barter.
Good morning. I'm Andy Barter. I'm the CEO at Little Rivers Healthcare. We're a federally qualified health center serving the eastern side of Orange County. So first of all, as the other folks I've heard have said, thank you so much for being there Tuesday. I wondered if you would be able to answer the phone with all that was going on, and you were there and you took our information in and you supported us as well as the other Vermont delegation team members. So this has been a week like none other that threatened the continuation of our health center in operations and has dearly affected the feeling of safety for our staff and patients. The logistical issue with continuation was this was a payroll week for us. We've grown in behavioral health services, for example, in the last few years by over 900%. Our visits have doubled annually overall for the health center. That's caused a great response for the community, but financial strain. So we've been long waiting for an employee retention credit processing by the IRS. In the meantime, we're in a very fragile financial, our days cash on hand are between 0 and 5 days. So this week, when the Health and Human Services payment management system went down, and it really did. I have the screenshots of the different statuses it had. It literally brought us to our knees. And we're here standing strong. I can give more details, but it rippled through all our staff, our board of directors, and threatened, the care of about 10,000 Vermonters. We also have capital projects that have had longstanding federal loans across Northern Borders, USDA, Health and Human Services. We had a pause, and the current next step for progression on those was approval by USDA, and they weren't able to work with us, although I think there's a breakthrough this morning, which puts a threat on our subcontractors, which then puts a threat on completing these projects. Happy to share more, but we're here. We have a lot of tenacity. We're very thankful for all your support, and hopefully this displays a window of what the effects were at a health center where collaboratively, you know well, but we provide care for over a third of Vermonters. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. And so appreciate your work.
Welcome.
Next on my screen is Kate Logan.
Hi, thanks so much, Senator Welch, and your staff. Thank you so much for your fearless representation and your support this week. I'm Kate Logan. I use she or they pronouns. I'm the director for the Vermont Coalition of Runaway and Homeless Youth Programs. We're a statewide network of youth serving agencies outside of Chittenden County in 10 counties. VCRIP is housed at Elevate Youth Services, which is based in Berlin, Vermont. VCRIP agencies provide housing, shelter, case management, and other services to runaway and homeless youth from age 12 to 24. VCRIP's direct service providers include Elevate Youth Services, Northeast Kindgom Youth Services, Northeast Kindgom Community Action, Lamoille County Mental Health Services, Northwest Counseling and Support Services, Homeless Prevention Center, Interaction, and new agencies with whom we were just about to bring on as new subgrantees in Addison County. The programs that VCRIP funds are 100% federally funded. We receive funding from both HUD and the Family and Youth Services Bureau at DHHS. Last year, Elevate Youth Services and the network of VCRIP subrecipients collectively served nearly 200 youth who were experiencing housing instability or homelessness with case management, and for those who made it to the top of a very long wait list for a short amount of resources, we directly provided housing. VCRIP agencies currently directly provide housing in youth-specific transitional housing and provide tenant-based rental assistance for youth who are ready to live independently. Program participants are provided case management by 9 full-time youth housing case managers across the state. Our agencies are currently serving 78 youth, and any further delay in receiving our resources would be hugely detrimental to these 78 youth. And this is at a time when we've seen the number of Vermont's youth experiencing housing instability or homelessness quadruple in the last 5 years. We meet a fraction of the need in the state right now. Our programs are already underfunded due to years of level funding, with the expectation that our agencies would continue to do the same level of work. There's inadequate support provided for grants administration and no possibility of using funds to maintain reserves, meaning that direct program work always takes precedent over capacity building and development work. So things are tight. This freeze has disrupted crucial contracting and other administrative processes that have already caused a delay in receiving reimbursement for resources already expended on these programs. And if there's any further delay in our access to our funding, payments for youth housing and payroll for case managers will not be possible for more than a month, representing a loss of nearly all youth-specific housing and case management resources outside of Chittenden County. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Looks like we will have time for probably 2 more people. So next on my screen is David Bond.
Hi, Senator. Great to see everybody. And thanks so much, Senator Welch, for making this space open and inviting us all in what looks like an insanely hectic schedule in DC right now. I appreciate it. I teach at Bennington College, and I speak from, I think, the research community here. I've been the recipient of a handful of NSF grants over the past couple of years. NSF grants that have not only pushed out what we know in certain disciplines, but also made concrete contributions to our communities in Vermont. We got an NSF grant that helped build out monitoring of PFAS in southern Vermont and was instrumental in securing clean water for about 400 households in Bennington. Also got an NSF that helped build out computer education for formerly incarcerated individuals and help them get jobs in today's economy. And I've also had an NSF that I had the great pleasure of working with Native communities in northern Alaska that are standing up at oil frontiers and demanding climate justice. With our friends at Landmark, as Jim, I think, just discussed, we also were standing ready for a transformative NSF grant to really invest in STEM education where it's needed most in southern Vermont. And we had got the award letter. We were excited. This had been over a year in the making. We're ready to go. All of a sudden, everything is upended by this. This is a giant mess, and it undermines so much of the work we're doing. It strikes me as blatantly illegal, massively destructive, especially to the most vulnerable in our communities, as all the nonprofits gathered here today have told us, that the most vulnerable are getting hit the hardest by this. Even with rescinding the memo, the message was loud and clear, and it was received. So many of the agencies that we're working with, and including on my end, NSF, continue to act as if that memo still stands. They've pulled back all of the active awards. They're reviewing them in this way that seems completely out of line with precedent and completely illegal, and they're pausing the distribution of funds. I sort of have this question of who's going to stand up to this? Colleges are an economic backbone to Vermont, and yet many small colleges are terrified of getting crossways of this administration for the very clear track record of retaliation that they've shown. We have thin margins. We operate on thin margins. We don't have deep pockets to stand up and speak out right now. Who's going to stand up? Who's going to speak out in this moment? That's the question I have, and that's the question I would love to hear from you.
Thank you. I'll try to address that. I mean, when we close, but the reality here, okay, is that you're being loud and vocal and allowing me to share these stories. It's got to add up. And I just want to say this. There's a lot of my Republican colleagues who in theory probably support this or support the president, but they live in communities where there's people who are trying to deal with the domestic violence, where they've got educational institutions where kids are doing research, where they have housing challenges. These are not unique to Vermont, okay? And my hope is that I share with my colleagues and ask them a question. What about your domestic violence shelters? What about your housing programs? And that then starts to transform this abstract, I'm going to cut, I'm going to be tough, we're going to save money, into the reality that people in their communities are really being affected in the same way that you are. And it's uphill for us, especially in this Congress, in the Senate, 53 to 47. So when we don't have the votes that we'd like to have, the House, it's a razor thin margin, but the Trump supporters are in control there. And Trump is hopeless in terms of his capacity to empathize with the consequences of the action that he's taking unilaterally and how this impacts everyday people. And that's what's so poignant for me. I mean, you guys are doing the work, and it's hard work. And you have to have confidence that when you go to the payment site, it works, okay? Because you've got people you're responsible to, your employees, but you've got the people you're serving and the institutions you're part of. And this is what's so destructive about it. I'm giving sort of closing remarks here because, in so many cases, I've met you, I've seen the work you do. I see how people have come to really depend on you. I see how much you contribute to the individual well-being of Vermonters. I see how much you contribute to the well-being and pride of a community. And why in the world would anyone, especially the President of the United States, who has more responsibility for the well-being of the people of this country than anyone, do something where it causes chaos, disruption, uncertainty, and damage? So I just, I won't have to say that again, but I'm just expressing to you my deep appreciation, and everything and anything I can do, that Bernie can do, that Becca can do, we're going to be here doing. And this is a long battle that we're going to be in. Sorry, Rebecca.
Oh, no problem. We're almost out of time, but Michael, you had your hand up. Did you want to say anything quickly?
No, I think Peter having the last word makes a lot of sense.
Well, Michael, I don't mind. You know, you do important work down there. So
well, you know, it's probably similar to a lot of organizations that Michael Redmond, the executive director of the Upper Valley Haven in White River Junction, Vermont, provide a lot of food programs that would be put at risk through cuts to cutting off the Vermont Food Bank funding, shelter that we operate for adults and families, and just outreach to people that are in need. A particular project that we had on the drawing board that was of great concern is to add a shelter capacity. And we know about the problem of homelessness in Vermont and the challenge that it's presenting in the very challenging housing market. But we were ready to add a 20-bed shelter and resource center, which would draw in a lot of the organizations as well that are framed here from the Upper Valley to help people in that moment and find permanent housing. And we had a significant grant as part of that, raised a lot of private money, but we had a grant that was coming from community facilities of USDA, and the uncertainty of that. And if right now it seems to be back on, but if it comes up again, it could jeopardize our ability to add those needed shelter beds. So I appreciate, because I think today overall the message was in the media, and what we heard as well, things are back to normal, everything's fine. And boy, did I learn a lot today. And if I don't know it, that means the whole community doesn't know it. So I really appreciate your giving the chance where media can really pick up on the story. The deed was done and it caused chaos, and it's still out there.
Well, it is, and we're going to have a long fight here. I mean, this unilateral action is, you know, it's clearly illegal. Okay. And the willingness of the president to do something that's blatantly illegal, but where, because of the incredible executive authority that a president of our country has, the executive branch will send out these stop work orders, basically. It's very destructive. And, you know, my view here is that if you have executive responsibility, and each of you does, okay, and you have to make really tough decisions about how best to operate your organization and fulfill your mission. And there's times when you have to take under consideration maybe some tough calls that are going to have some impacts locally. But the starting point for Vermonters, and this is true in our nonprofit world, and it's true, you know, in my experience in our for-profit businesses, is do no harm. You just don't come out with some explosive, destructive edict. You have some restraint and appreciation that when you act, it has consequences. So you're careful about avoiding doing harm unnecessarily. And what has been totally cast aside here by the executive, in this case, President Trump, is any consideration of the consequences of this unilateral action. And just, you know, it's amazing. All of us who are here on the call, how many different organizations and how many different employees and how many different Vermonters who are dependent and on your services have been affected for no good reason. You know, the court has rescinded it, but it's created the uncertainty that all of you have to live with. You're not complaining, you're just explaining, okay? And you bear that burden of keeping the lights on in your organization, but you also have to bear that emotional burden that help that you were providing to that Vermonter, that woman who's in need of some shelter from a domestic abuser, that family was going to get health care at Three Rivers, and look in their eyes and you don't have an answer for them. And you know what? We have to have a society where we care about one another. And we can acknowledge that there's really tough problems. We can even acknowledge, hey, we've got to deal with a budget issue. But you do that with a spirit of empathy. You do it with a spirit of mutuality, and you do it with a spirit of integrity. So it's very disturbing to me what's going on, and I'm more so after hearing from each of you. But I got to tell you, it's very inspiring for me to hear from each of you and see you accepting this burden of leadership that you have. Is very, very inspiring. So, you know, you can just count on me doing all I can. I wish I had the magic bullet, you know, all I have to do is, you know, make this speech or file that bill, file that resolution. It's going to be tougher than that. But your delegation here in DC, Bernie and Becca and me, are completely united in advocacy to try to mitigate the harm that is so carelessly, in my view, so cruelly being inflicted on you and so many Vermonters. So thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining today. And I've put my contact information in the chat and also the web form where we are collecting stories. So thank you very much for joining and have a great day.